Going live. I guess I'm live. All right. Hey. So, looks like I am almost live. I am live. They tell me I'm live. I guess it's here. Hey, is anyone here? Not yet. Okay, I'll just give it a minute and then I will get started. Let's go. Well, that's this one. Too many keyboards. All right. Okay, so I think we're live. I do think we're live. I've said let's go. We've got one person watching. Rumble, not quite yet live. Not sure what that's doing. And looks like I am live on Odyssey. But no one's there. All right. This is great. Thank you to the one person that is watching right now. I'll get started in just a moment. Because I assume some people will be told that this stream is happening. So, all right, let's go. Well, might as well get started, whether anyone's here or not. Let's just do it. First, flame on. All right, we got flames happening, and we are ready to start the show. Apparently, the show for no one. Oh, wow. Error. Please use keyboard frame frequency to 4 seconds or less. Currently, keyframes are not something. Okay, well, I'm not sure what that is. So the stream status is poor. Don't know why. Guess we're learning. But we're live. Let's just go for it anyway. With no audience. Let's just do it anyway, shall we? Hey, welcome. I'm so glad you're joining me today. It is Monday, January 9th, 2023. And apparently I'm live on YouTube and Odyssey. And Rumble is not quite live. So I guess they'll catch up with the huge number of people that are watching me live. So we got the flames going. Have a sip of coffee. And let's get started. Apparently my stream quality is poor, but I don't know what to do about that. So maybe that is why it is not being sent out to anyone. Perhaps. Who knows how these things work? But let's just get going on it, shall we? Okay. So today, I want to talk about the Brazil protest, and there's a lot happening with that, and in fact, there's a lot going on with that and streaming, social media as well. So that's going to be an interesting story. I want to talk about the concessions that were made by Kevin McCarthy to win his vote on Friday night. What exactly did he have to do to get that to happen? Then the first vote in the House of Representatives is today. I'm going to explain what that's about. And lastly, go Frogs. My TCU Horned Frogs are in the national championship. That hasn't happened my entire life. And so I thought I'd throw on some gear. I got my hat here, and I'll be cheering on the Horned Frogs tonight as the football game happens against, I don't know, some other team. I hear they're okay, but we'll get to that. So, and first, here's my social media, and you can see that I have totally got all my graphics under control. At Coffee and Nuance on all the platforms. You can check me out. I'm streaming live on Rumble and Odyssey and YouTube right now. So check it out on a different platform and leave me a message or something, because I got to find out how these things are going. But let us get to the first story today, and that is about the election protests in Brazil. Now, whether you want to call them a protest or a riot or an insurrection or whatever you want to call it, I'll call it a protest. But supporters of former Brazilian President Bolsonaro stormed Congress, the Supreme Court, and the presidential palace in Brazil on Sunday, calling for either military intervention to restore Bolsonaro to power or to remove current President da Silva from office. Lula da Silva. Yeah. The buildings were largely empty at the time because it was the weekend. Police eventually regained control of the buildings and arrested hundreds of participants. Lula accused Bolsonaro of encouraging the rioters and signed a decree allowing the federal government to take control of security in the capital. Bolsonaro denied the accusation and condemned the violence. The incident has been compared to the storming of the U.S. Capitol in 2021 by supporters of then President Donald Trump. Now, what's interesting about this, if you're trying to follow along in the news, every site that I go to has a different number of people that were arrested. You know, Washington Post says it's 300, New York Times says it's 1,200, Yahoo says something different, Reuters says something different. Very interesting. But several hundred people have been arrested with that huge protest yesterday. Now, this gets down to something very interesting, and that is what Meta and YouTube are doing about this election in Brazil, or the results of this election in Brazil. They're following the same pattern that they did for the U.S. election, okay? They're censoring it. That's right. Meta and YouTube are removing content supporting or praising the recent attack on the Brazilian government buildings by supporters of President Bolsonaro. The attack saw the presidential palace's windows smashed, part of Congress flooded with a sprinkler system, and rooms in the Supreme Court ransacked. In response, Meta has designated Brazil a temporary high-risk location and is removing content calling for people to take up arms or forcibly invade government buildings. Both Meta and YouTube are also removing content that supports or praises the attack, and YouTube is surfacing authoritative content on its homepage and in search results. Telegram is working with Brazilian government and fact-checking groups to remove content inciting violence, while TikTok and Twitter have not yet commented. Now, that's interesting that YouTube is elevating content that it believes is correct, and they are removing content that they do not believe is correct. And what is this based on? Because I didn't read in the story that YouTube and Google became election experts and they were down in Brazil and they saw what happened. There's no report of that. I don't know what happened down there. But it gets very dangerous if the media can decide what you can talk about and what you can't talk about. And, that was one of the big problems with what happened on January 6th, 2 years ago, is certain opinions are not even allowed to be expressed. Those are censored. Certain videos are elevated, so if you're supporting the narrative of YouTube, supporting the narrative of Meta or Facebook, which coincidentally is the exact same narrative of the State Department, just coincidence. Those videos can be seen by people if you question the results of the U.S. election or also the Brazilian election. That is not allowed. Not allowed at all. So that is that's interesting, and it is also interesting as where Facebook and YouTube are getting the truth from. Where are they deriving this truth? Did they have people observing the election in Brazil to see that it was fair and accurate? Because if they did, that'd be a good thing to hear about. But it's just being censored. And I always have to wonder about things that you're not allowed to say. Now, I'm not saying them, but it is interesting to see what you're not allowed to say. Who knows? But that's about the Brazilian election. It was quite crazy, and I do think that all of these comparisons to January 6th, I guess there are a group of people that thought that there was some fishy business, some shenanigans with the election, and they were protesting it. At least in this one, it's not being called a coup d'etat, like it wasn't an attempted coup. At least the media this time is saying that it was, violent rioters, I guess. But they have stopped short of calling it a coup, unlike what they did here. But next, I want to talk about the concessions that were made for Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy did finally win the Speaker of the House. He did so, as I said would happen, that those Republican holdouts that said they would not vote for him did not vote for him. They did come to an agreement where they voted president, and there were enough people that voted for him that he was the winner. But they did not vote for him, and they did do what they said. Now, I think one of the biggest stories to come out of this, it's very interesting to look at how the media has covered these Republicans that would not be in lockstep with Kevin McCarthy. The White House called them an embarrassment. They were referred to as like the Taliban 20. They were referred to by Crenshaw as terroristic. It's really incredible how they have been portrayed. But what were they really asking for that was so bad? What were they asking for? I tried to find out, and yet I have still not found out all the things that have been negotiated. You would think that that would be the story. You would think that the New York Times, that the Washington Post, that NBC would talk to one of these congresspeople and say, hey, what did you get out of this? And yet I can't find any mainstream media that has talked with any of those congresspeople to find out exactly what they got. Now, the Epoch Times did an interview with Andrew Ogles of Tennessee, and he's from Tennessee's 5th Congressional District. He was involved in negotiations for the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, the negotiations resulted in several reforms to the way the U.S. Congress will conduct business, including the establishment of a church-style committee to investigate the weaponization of government organizations such as the FBI against American citizens, the implementation of term limits, the requirement for single-subject bills with a 72-hour minimum reading period, and the ending of COVID mandates and funding. So set the COVID mandates and funding aside because that can be contentious. But the other thing of investigating the government, the FBI, and what they're doing, that's a good thing. Implementation of term limits. How come we haven't heard about that they were asking for term limits? You know, I had on Meet the Press, George Stephanopoulos' show this week, yesterday. They didn't talk about what was being asked, what the concessions were. And I find it very interesting that all of the reporting, or most of the reporting that I've seen about this subject, talks about how bad the Republicans were, how bad and toxic and far right these holdouts were for voting for McCarthy. And yet what they were asking for sounds like things that the entire country would like. Investigating the FBI, term limits, the requirement to allow 72 hours to read a bill. You know, a lot of these bills come in, these big spending bills, they throw everything together, they drop it off at 1 in the morning, and then they got to vote for it in the following morning, you know, hours later, and it's 4,000 pages. No one can read that. And that's ridiculous. That's something that Democrats and Republicans and everyone should want, is the ability of our representatives to be able to read the legislation that they're signing into law. So all of these terrible right-wing holdouts that wouldn't vote for McCarthy, what they got was a really big deal. And you may not know what the Church Commission is. It was a U.S. Senate Select Committee in 1975. It investigated abuses by the CIA, the NSA, FBI, and IRS. Sounds familiar. It was chaired by Idaho Senator Frank Church. That's why it's called the Church Committee. He was a Democrat from Idaho. And the committee was part of a series of investigations into intelligence abuses in 1975. Well, what did they find when they had this Church Committee? Well, one of the shocking revelations was about Operation MK Ultra. That involved the drugging and torture of unwitting U.S. citizens as part of human experimentation on mind control. Yeah, that was real, and that was uncovered in 1975 by the Church Committee. COINTELPRO involving the surveillance and infiltration of American political and civil rights organizations. They've been doing that ever since. Pretty much any organization that has any power whatsoever has some feds in it. You can count on that. Family Jewels. This was a CIA program to covertly assassinate foreign leaders. Also found out from the Church Committee. Lastly, Operation Mockingbird. As a systematic propaganda campaign with domestic and foreign journalists operating as CIA assets. Yeah. And dozens of U.S. news organizations providing cover for CIA activity. That was discovered in 1975. In fact, most people don't even know about Operation Mockingbird, and I suggest you look it up if you haven't. And lastly, Project Shamrock, which was a major telecommunications companies shared their traffic with the NSA. So much has been learned. Wrong Chiron. How about that? Much has been learned from the Church Committee in 1975, and I am so glad everyone should be ecstatic that they're going to have a similar committee to investigate what our government has been doing as far as control of social media companies, promoting propaganda, censoring, all that kind of stuff. Everything that's come out in the Twitter files. That's going to be the subject of this church-style committee. And I think that's something that we can all look forward to. What I find interesting, though, is the coverage, again, of these concessions. I didn't see the New York Times talking about how there's going to be this big church committee style hearings. That should be big news, but it's not. It makes you wonder who's pulling the strings of the media to hide this kind of information. I don't know. Maybe the church committee will find out for us. All right. Okay. Let's see. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. Oh, here was my church committee graphic I forgot to put up. Oh, well. So the first vote is tonight. The U.S. House of Representatives will vote Monday on rules that will govern it for the next 2 years. The legislation includes several changes that will limit the power of Kevin McCarthy, including allowing a single lawmaker to call for his removal at any time, and changes meant to sharply limit spending. McCarthy agreed to these concessions in order to win support from these hardliners for his leadership bill. The vote will be the first test of McCarthy's ability to lead the caucus, as Republicans have a narrow majority, 222 to 212. In the House, Democrats are expected to vote against the package. Now, why would you be against the package of rooting out corruption? Right? Seems like that would be a good thing to be for. Term limits. Wow. Who's against term limits? Well, most people in Congress are against term limits, but for me, I think that term limits would be welcome to Congress. It would be totally welcome. So we'll see if anything happens from that. And lastly, wrong button. There we go. And lastly, my TCU Horned Frogs are playing for the Natty tonight, the national championship. The number 1 Georgia Bulldogs will face off against the number 3 TCU Horned Frogs in the College Football Playoff National Championship Monday night. Georgia is seeking to become the first team in college football playoff era to win consecutive national championships, while TCU is hoping to become the first team in Big 12 history to win the college football playoff game and finish the regular season undefeated. The game will be played at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California, and will be broadcast on ESPN. Georgia and TCU have played 4 times in program history. Georgia has won all 4 of those matchups. But the past does not always predict the future. I am calling it Horned Frogs tonight. If you see the players and people on the sidelines doing this little bunny foo-foo hand signal, this is the little symbol for the hand sign for the horned frogs. Little horny toad, I guess. These are the little tiny horns. It's cute, I guess. But I am a graduate of TCU. The ring I wear every day on my right hand is my class ring. Turns out that nobody wears a class ring in Portland or the Pacific Northwest, but that was a thing in Texas. You know, when you graduate somewhere, you buy a ring to wear and have a little fun hand sign. Doesn't exist up here in Portland, but whatever. But I will be watching the game tonight, rooting for the Horned Frogs. I hope that you will join me in putting out some collective energy. Go Frogs. Anyway, I look forward to reading your comments. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.